Hello, dear students, friends, and the public in general. My name's Sean Hobbs, and I am here to discuss with you guys today the issue that I'm seeing a lot of people face in my research writing course, and that is the development of an effective topic. And this is important um, when you build a strong piece of research. So I started to think about what's a good metaphor I could give students so they could begin to focus their topics. And the way I like to think of an effective topic creation would be a bit like, imagine that you need to focus your topic, but then ask broad and in once you have a focus topic, once you do, first you have to focus the topic. Once you have the focus topic, then you need to ask the broader questions. And the questions that will actually inform a lot of other things about the topic. Because what the topic does is it's imagine it as a tight field of analysis. And that within that tight field of analysis, you're going to be able to draw out a lot of extra newer important information. Okay, so that's effective research, and finding that topic is the first step. So the example I gave was the example of to students was the example of the Mongolian football field, and that might seem a little weird. When I say football, I mean of course Mongolian soccer, as it's practiced by the Mongolian Football Federation, which I did not know existed, and I think many people do not know the import of Mongolian soccer, Mongolian football, because, well, I think most of us have probably a very pejorative and limited view of what Mongolia is. I think it's likely a very dynamic and interesting country that I'd love to visit someday. But our traditional view of what Mongolia would be people who do this, who shoot bows and arrows, right? And they, they wrestle, and they do a kind of step wrestling there in the rolling hills of Mongolia. And of course, they live in, as we imagine at least, they live in a yurt, these tent-like structures here. Now, is that 100% true for Mongolia? Well, I guess it probably isn't. I think it's, like I said, I think it's likely a very complex place. And so they probably have some good football players, some good soccer players. Now, but given this prejudice that I feel, and I think many of us probably feel when you mention Mongolian soccer or Mongolian football, the next step for us, if we thought about this, and in my metaphor, I said, let's say someone came to you and said, hey, you know what? They have the best football players, that is soccer players in the world, and they come from Mongolia. And I think most people in the world, even Americans who don't know anything really about soccer, well, a few of us do, but not many of us know much about soccer, would scoff. I mean, because there's teams like Argentina, the Germans, the Italians, the Brazilians, right? And probably those four countries, with the inclusion of the United Kingdom, if you bring some Scottish players down to play, even a Welsh player or two, you might argue that those countries I just mentioned likely produce the best soccer players in the world. And I know that there's people who might be angry in Turkey and France, and of course I forgot Spain. Jeez, all right, Spain and Portugal. Anyway, so all those countries likely produce the best football players in the world, and most people would say Brazil is that. But our metaphor would then be dependent on someone making the claim that the football players in Mongolia are the best in the world. Okay, so how do you get around developing your critique of this? Well, the first step might be to say, well, okay, so if they're the best football players in the world, do they play for the wealthiest, most expensive teams, the best teams in the world? So we'd likely go to Spain, we go to La Liga, and we'd look there in obviously Barcelona's cadre and Real Madrid. And again, there may have been a Mongolian football player that played in on these teams, but I think it's unlikely. just from what I know about the limited amount of information I know about professional football. Yeah, those rosters are dominated by South Americans, or the best of the best in Western Europe. So, and I guess that's from a few other places as well, some parts of Africa, West Africa, etc. But no Mongolians. So if the first step, if we wanted to critique the best teams, well, it wouldn't work. So what would be the next place we would go? Well, I'd probably say if you wanted to do this research well and really focus the research down, I'd recommend that you would then go to Mongolia, which would be the country where, why not go to Mongolia, right? And if you went to Mongolia, it's likely, well, after you're in Mongolia, it isn't just that you could go anywhere in Mongolia. I mean, you couldn't find the best football players in the world, or at least in Mongolia, on any old soccer field, right? You'd have to actually find a pitch where the football / soccer was the best. So you'd likely have to go to a large city with a team. Now, it looks like, from my limited amount of research on this topic, that yeah, we do have some professional Mongolian teams, a national team, et cetera, et cetera. So I would recommend finding out which team this is, or which of the best teams you'd go to, and you'd go watch these guys, these Mongolians, play some football. And you'd have to get to their official, you'd have to get to their official field and their pitch, and you'd have to really spend some time there. You'd have to interview the players, you'd have to interview the coaches and people around the players. And from that study, now again, notice what we did. We made a big general idea. We said Mongolian football, right? And then we said, well, no, let's focus Mongolian football a little more. Let's try to understand it a bit more. Well, first off, we said, well, are there any international Mongolian or clubs, international clubs that use a lot of Mongolian football players? And personally, I doubt those clubs exist, although they might. So that would be a place to go. Now, if that didn't exist, which I think it likely does not exist, then you would go to Mongolia. Okay, but again, Mongolia is a gigantic field. So imagine what you're trying to do when you're developing your research is you're shrinking your field. So we said, okay, go to Mongolia, still a very large country in Central Asia, right? So then you'd say, well, no, go to likely a large city which has a very good football team, populated predominantly, if not solely, by Mongolian footballers. You go to that club, you find that pitch of the club, and you watch the games. And then beyond watching the games, you interview all the people connected. Now, that would give us a lot of information about Mongolian football. We'd be able to decide one way or the other if they were the best players in the world. And even if we weren't able to decide they were the best players in the world, we would gain massive insights both into Mongolian society. We would gain insights into the sporting community there. We would gain insights into familial decisions and financial decisions. We would gain insights into, gosh, just talking about this whole thing, I think I want to go do this research someday. I really do. I think it'd be a really interesting study to study Mongolian football. At any rate, imagine now this metaphor applied to your project. This, your project could be, sexual harassment in the workplace in Egypt. Okay, it could be the study of the sale of the Turkish fig all around the world and the popularity of Turkish figs. You could do, an investigation into the position of schizophrenia and how schizophrenia is shown in Polish films. Whatever it is, whatever thing you want to critique and study, you need to think about limiting your field, making your field as tight and as focused as possible, so much so that you would be able to create your own personal Mongolian football field, football pitch, in which you could draw out a lot of very interesting studies. Focus the field, tighten the field, and then ask questions that will both connect with the field itself, but then open up other questions that you will be able to inform your study with. Finally, and lastly, and most importantly, I think, you should do a topic that you're interested in. Don't do a topic that you're bored with. Doing a topic that you're bored with will inherently create it will not help you with your writing. Don't do a topic that you feel forced by. Do a topic that you're really interested in, because you're going to give a few months of your life over to the creation of this topic in my research courses. Okay, good luck, everybody. Thumbs up, and please come by and see me. Write emails, any questions that you have. You guys know my email. And about the process of creating a strong research topic, i.e. the Mongolian football field. All right, take care.